No, we're live right
Well,
now. I
my
just
live
can't see
button has
myself.
not worked yet.
Doo-doo.
I really should bring that cardboard sign back out. Okay, I see you. I can go live now. Yeah, 2024. We should have technology where we don't have to wait for that time and just keep clicking that button for a minute and a half.
Just sit here.
Well, I think we're ready now. It's official. We're here.
Hi, everybody.
Welcome back to the Ignited Podcast,
where you feel re-energized and remoralized.
I thought you were going to say, I'm Brittany.
I'm Brittany.
When you went over to that mic, I was expecting, I'm Brittany.
Man, I'm better now. Like I'm on it.
I know you are. I love you.
Although I did just listen to the introduction again because I was putting last episode together, and I was like, "Oh, that's so cute. We have
We're
to keep it.
adorable.
We can't. Yeah, we can't re-record.
We can't make it more polished. It's almost in sync.
It's almost, yeah, almost in sync. That's our next T-shirt.
There we go. We have to keep this record. Anyways, welcome back to the podcast. Brittany and I are live today talking about chapter 2 of Make Me. And I'm up first for the summary, or so I've been told, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
2 minutes.
2 minutes.
Should we summarize? Like, or I know that we're about to summarize. But yes. Should we like just tell people what's going on if they haven't? I'll do that. I'll do that right now. Okay, so if you haven't followed along, we are reading Make Me by Eric Toshalis, and it is all about student resistance in the classroom and seeing student behavior through a resistance lens, which can help us prevent and proactively offer better solutions to the behavior because we understand more of what's actually happening. And so we are on chapter 2, and we are going to talk about social reproduction theory today. And we do 2-minute summaries at the beginning. Ash is going to do hers first. Then I'm going to do mine. And then we will go through the chapter, talk about our favorite quotes, talk about a little bit about what we read and how we apply it to the classroom, how it relates to us as teachers, educators, and as students, because we were all students once.
Awesome. I love that summary, Britt.
Thanks.
And now for the most fun part where we do our time summary on air. So show me that timer.
Timer.
Let's do this.
All right. Are you ready?
I was born ready. All right. So in chapter 2 of Make Me, it's called Making Trouble Makes It Worse, Theories of Social Reproduction. And this whole chapter talks about the way our society gets reproduced in school and how we kind of just blindly accept it and we think it's just the way it is, when in reality, it doesn't have to be this way. And the chapter also dives into kind of, I would say, like the more sinister reasons behind why this is, like the trying to make different classes of people. But anyways, it starts off by talking about what social reproduction theory is, which is basically like whatever group you have just gets reproduced. And then it also talks about the myth of meritocracy, where all you have to do is work hard and get it, when in reality, that's not the case. It then dives into looking at how this gets proliferated in school and about why this is the case. There's a point in here where it actually quotes, I believe it's President Woodrow Wilson, I'm trying to find the part right now, where he talks about why we want to have schools that create this like elite literate class, but then we also want to have schools create this working class. Now we shouldn't get those two things confused. So when you look at our schools like this, you see some schools where you have creativity flourishing. We have kids being given more autonomy. In other schools where it's super strict and punitive. And these differences are oftentimes seen in socioeconomic ways. So in the story, it unpacks that and it looks at why we as educators just kind of accept things being this way. And it proposes some solutions, which we will talk about in our action steps. All right.
Excellent as always.
Thank you, Brittany. Time for you to wow us.
Okay.
Let me get my timer up. All right, here we go.
All right, chapter 2, Eric Toshalis. This chapter was entirely on social reproduction theory, which I had never even heard about until I read this book. And it was actually the chapter that I was like, oh my gosh, like we absolutely have to do this more. Like everybody needs to know what social reproduction theory is. So it starts with the idea that schooling in America was created to be the great equalizer. That was the idea behind it. However, then you have people like Woodrow Wilson and other people who influenced how school was designed back in, like the 1800s, and how it was designed to be um a well, how there was, um, a clear line between the type of education that the elite were getting and the education that the lower class was getting, and it brings into light the theories, the research, the history that really isn't it's not talked about. It's not talked about in our ed courses. It's not talked about in public education, but that is there was a design. It was an intentional design in American education to keep the lower class as lower in the lower class and to keep the elitist in the elite class. And there's even a specific term he uses, which I'll find out later, but that oh gosh, it's the timer. This term, I'm gonna continue this because
Keep going. Keep
it's
going.
gonna be like what we're gonna ride this wave, okay?
Let's do it.
So okay, so there's a term that he uses, and I'm gonna find it. But until I find it, I want to tell you guys just a little bit about like what it means, the context of it. And it's the idea that um oh my gosh, now I'm gonna like linguistically freeze up and my ADHD is like crackling in the background like pop rocks. Mm. Okay, so he brings up this idea that schooling are social oh gosh, like not social buckets. Ash, my brain froze.
So I think I would say like these social groups that are in society are
Mm,
more, would you call it that or no?
no, keep going. I like it. It'll get me back on track.
Like the social groups in society that we are operating in and that our schools operate in are more man-made than we would expect, and how there are things that we do every day that we're numb to that proliferate that.
Oh, yeah. There is it's not learning it wasn't learning to labor. It was just such a good term and I want to find it and I will. But I guess I'm like proliferating on this.
Well, I
Um
think it'll probably be one of the quotes that you address. Why don't you go to that section and then pull up one of your quotes from that area?
okay.
And that might bring it back too.
So to those within the system. I like where you were going, and I think that we should run with that until I get my train of thought back, where it's, um, it doesn't feel like it because we're embedded in the system, it doesn't feel like it's out of the ordinary. It
Mhm.
doesn't feel like, he says imposed or invented, like it
And
just feels
by it,
normal.
like the social reproduction that's happening in schools.
Yes.
So
Yes.
let me read one of the quotes I have because it relates to this
Okay.
concept we're talking about. For those who are reading along with us, it's from page 25. And it says that the power to convince students and educators to internalize these norms, like the norms of social production, is what makes public education an ideological state apparatus. When these norms become normal, they appear to be obvious or true. And if the individual spends enough time working within an ideological apparatus, the constructedness of such norms becomes hard to see. The ideology becomes our reality, and we stop questioning it. As a result, people do not feel like they are internalizing or deciding to believe anything because it is the way it is. According to Althusser, those who internalize the ideology and who remain consistently compliant with regard to its expectations may actually experience the apparatus as a place of freedom. To them, everything just feels right, and they therefore become invested in the system's perpetuation. Those who question are told to stop rocking the boat. This is how we do it here. And I picked this one because, especially like working with different teachers in the schools and navigating these systems that are not designed to help kids, like they have to rock the boat. Like we have to rock the boat.
Mhm.
And some schools, it's a bit easier to do that in. Some you get more pushback. But the fact that like this is the boat that we're on that is going in a bad direction,
This is the only boat we have.
yeah, like it's not being questioned. Like we
Yeah.
just accept like this is how it has to be.
Mhm. Yeah, and I really resonated with the part where he says, like, people people who feel comfortable in
Mhm.
that setting, they feel comfortable, um, they know the rules, they can play the game. They don't want the system to change because it worked for them,
Mhm.
and when you question that, that creates a type of cognitive dissonance for them, and it seems like their entire world is, like, falling apart, and they have a very visceral reaction to it, and that's why a lot of teachers who do the type of work that we do face such opposition.
Yeah, because it feels so
When
personal
Yeah,
to
yep.
people when you mention anything that rocks the boat.
Mhm. Well, it's the same way when we did Punished by Rewards last year, and that's by Alfie Kohn, and you can listen to that. That was our season 1. And when you bring up that rewards don't actually work, like, people lose their minds. They
Yeah.
lose their minds, and, like, they'll go to that place of, like, "Oh, do you earn a paycheck?" Like, it's a
Yeah.
very emotional conversation.
Mhm.
Like, and I'm just like, "Nah, dude, I just don't think we should use sticker charts because it's demeaning." Like, but
Mhm.
yeah, I guess that's everything we do in our book club is kinda like rocking the boat.
Yes. That could also be our next T-shirt design, rock the boat.
Yeah, rock the boat. Okay, so I actually found my quote that my brain
Let's
froze on.
hear it.
Okay. So he's talking about social stratification, and that's the idea that uh, whatever social class that you're born into, it's it's stratified. You'll move linearly, right? You'll move um, you're not going to move up the ladder. It's just going to be like a sideways move. And it seems to persist, if not strengthen, over time. Um, and he explains how capitalism reproduces itself in each subsequent generation despite its glaring inequities. Althusser, who is the person that came up with, it's called state apparatuses and ideological state apparatuses. Um, he he draws a distinction between state apparatuses of reach and then the ideological state apparatuses of reproducing, like social reproduction. He theorizes that state apparatuses are the components of a society that keep order primarily through threat of punishment or violence. Examples include the police, the military, the FBI, courts, and prisons. But then there's ideological state apparatuses. And these are the institutions that maintain control over the population, mostly through less overt, but still coercive means. Churches, temples, professional organizations, unions, country clubs, families, and the media, are all examples of ideological state apparatuses. And so state apparatuses like the police and the courts, they accomplish their goal by threatening or causing pain. And ideological state apparatuses function by using ideology. And as we know, a huge psychological need for anybody to flourish or anybody to really like psychologically function is belonging. And the feeling of being ostracized is one of the feelings that can lead, like, that's one of the biggest fears that human beings can have, like the brain can have, is being sent out of the den, out of your group. And so ideological state apparatuses control by fear of abandonment, a fear of rocking the boat. And that's churches, temples, professional organizations, union, country clubs, families, media, and schools. Did you freeze? Oh,
No, I'm here. I was just listening to you.
okay. So, I really liked that idea because one, I had the idea, but I didn't have the language to express that.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I've noticed that in society that there are institutions that control by ideology, um, but I didn't know that there was an entire, section of thought or study or research on it.
Yeah. I've looked into some of this stuff when I was in grad school, but I didn't look into it in the depth I think this book is going to go into.
Mhm.
Did you have something that you wanted to say with that involving our point from earlier about the social reproduction?
It was everything that I just said with social
Mhm.
reproduction. There's two, like, there's two methods,
Okay, like
and
different ways it
it's
comes
state.
about.
Yeah, it's state and then ideological. That's what I wanted to say. It was the ideological state apparatus that my brain froze on, which you can see why, because that is a lot to say.
It is a lot to say. That's a mouthful right there. Did you have another quote? I know we were talking before the podcast started.
No,
Did you have
yeah,
another
yeah.
quote that you wanted to share with us?
Oh, yeah. Um Okay, so this one talks about hailing. It
Yeah.
also talks about ideology, which we already covered, but hailing
Tell the
is
people
the
what hailing is.
yeah. So hailing is not icy snow falling from the sky. Hailing is the act of saying, "Hey, you, come here. Hey, turn around.
Mhm.
Freeze."
Yep.
It's the act of calling on a human being from a position of assumed authority and control, and how that person the I like how that person shapes the idea of who you are in society and who they
Mhm.
are in society. So
Yeah.
when we're going to schools with a lot of security officers or principals that use hailing in the hallways or in the classrooms, they are painting a very vivid picture of who they are in relationship to school and who the students are in relationship to school. And that picture is one of um the like dominance and obediently.
Hmm.
So that is hailing
And
when
now, what
you
would you say? Sorry, you want to finish your thought? I know I jumped
no,
in. What would you
um
say then? Did you say no? I don't want to finish my thought.
no, like no, you're good. Go ahead.
Okay, I was gonna say then what would you say then to like a school leader or a teacher who is like, well, this is the way that like the kids will listen. If we don't do this, they're not going to listen or things are just going to get out of control and wild.
I would definitely do some inquiry as to why
Mm,
they feel like that's the only method. I mean, a lot of the times it's effective because society has used it for so long to keep um oppressed populations in oppression. So like it works, but should we be using it?
yeah,
Like
like the ethical question.
right, like I had somebody in my comments that said um that kids weren't disobedient when we could beat them with rulers. Like, well, no
Love those comments.
crap.
What?
Like, I'm just like, "Oh, oh." But just because you can doesn't mean you should.
Yeah,
So,
like
if
where are
we
your ethical lines?
right, and what's the goal? Like,
Yeah.
is the goal to get kids to sit? Because if that's the goal, hail away. But if the
Hmm.
goal is to get them to learn and to be motivated and to be engaged and to be empathetic and to be better citizens, like hailing isn't going to get you that. So that's what I would say. And then
Yes.
I'd be like, all right, let's explore some things.
That will get you what you want. Because I think that's what a lot
Right.
of schools and teachers are stuck in. Like, they have this idea of how they want things to be, but they're stuck
Hmm.
with this toolbox of outdated and punitive tools that are not going to
Yeah.
create what you want,
Right.
you
Right.
know? Like, if you're operating with vinegar and you're trying to make brownies, that's not gonna taste good. Like, you need to
No.
actually get the ingredients you want to make the thing you wanna make. I actually
Right.
made vinegar brownies one time. It was
I was gonna say,
Halloween.
like, that's not
Yeah,
an
that would
that's not like a
that's not a
normal
normal
metaphor.
thing.
Yeah.
No,
Like,
no,
where did you get
I did that one time. I was trying to make brownies, and I mixed up vinegar with canola oil. It was a Halloween party. I made them for, like, a group of kids. They all thought they were poisonous brownies. They were like, "Oh, I'm dying," like, fell to the ground. Yeah, I'm not a
trick or
baker.
treat? No, neither
Yeah,
am I.
that was an accident. Anyways, I
Oh,
have
wait, so oh, I'm that wasn't my quote. I
ah!
have to read my quote now.
That was the pre-word, the foreword, if
That
you
yeah,
will.
that was I was defining hailing, so everybody has, like, the key terms. Okay.
Okay, let's hear your
Alright,
quote.
so the quote is, "And if institutions can use ideology and hailing to control what people believe about themselves, those institutions don't have to worry too much about controlling how those individuals will behave because people will control themselves." So it's saying like the schools are creating the the schools are creating people who will that walk away with an idea of who they are that is low on the totem pole in society.
Yeah.
And yeah, and they're not going to make too many waves. They're not going to rise up and protest or,
Mhm.
question.
Yeah, and that
Kinda
leads
sad.
me into my next quote, which is a continuation of what I was reading on page 25. So like this normalization of what we're doing. So it says this normalization produces shapes or process shapes not only how educators understand students' needs, but also who those students become. For example, researchers have long noted that schools tend to teach working class kids in a more regimented fashion, emphasizing discipline, obedience, punctuality, and behavioral control. It's what those students need, we reason, so that they will be prepared for factory or service sector jobs, in which the necessity to follow orders is crucial. I'm going to pause right now. This is not the text, this is my own thought. I also feel like people do this because they think this is what has to be done for the kids to learn. You know, I don't think that many teachers are going into it now thinking like, I'm going to do this so they'll be a good factory worker someday. You know, I don't think they actually think that. I think people end up thinking like, well, this is just what we have to do to get the kids to learn or they're going to be wild. Back into the text, page 26. In middle class or upper class schools, however, or in tracked classrooms where most of the students come from such backgrounds, the pedagogical approaches tend to be far more open. Students in these contexts are encouraged to explore their own questions, negotiate meanings, express their perspectives, and take more electives. Direct supervision is rare in these settings, and behavior is controlled less by rewards and punishments, and far more by stated and unstated norms that students are expected to internalize as normal. These students are prepared for leadership. It is not just that schools teach different students differently as a way of preparing them for their predetermined positions in society. It is that schools convince teachers, students, and communities that those differences are natural instead of invented. We will return to that foundation later. End quote. Which kind of just echoes what you just said.
Yeah. Yeah. So how do you think like you can apply this, everything that we read, to the classroom? What are
Are we
your
action steps?
Yeah.
I highlighted them because he actually kind of gave them in this chapter for
Yeah.
us. So I think I wrote the word action steps in my bright yellow marker.
I love it. You were prepared.
You know, I try. So these action steps come not from the word of Ashland. They come from the mouth of Michael Apple, who is an education theorist. And on page 35, it says that we need to be asking ourselves a bunch of different questions when looking at these concepts. So, whose knowledge is this? How did it become official? What is the relationship between this knowledge and the ways in which it is taught and evaluated? And who has cultural, social, and economic capital in this society? Who benefits from the definition of legitimate knowledge and from the way schooling and this society are organized, and who does not? So, all that to say, ask questions. Ask questions. When you're doing things at school or when you're reprimanding a student or you're trying to like address a behavior, ask yourself why. Like, why are you addressing it like this? Why is that bothering you so much? What is the reason for all these things that we are doing? And keep an open mind and keep an inquisitive lens.
I love that. I want to add to it something that I heard from a lecture that I was listening to by Gloria Lanson Billings. The lecture is from Annenberg University, and it's What Are Teachers to Do? And she talks about like a total reset. And one of the teachers that was sitting in on the lecture asked her, in the age of anti-intellectualism, what are teachers to do? And uh, Gloria Lanson Billings had a really good response, and it's we can't put that on the teachers. We've got to reach out and lean on the community. And I think that this is this is more of an action step for the community members, the parents, the volunteers out there, is that we need to be having these conversations in our community groups. And we need to make sure that we're paying attention to who gets on our school board, to who is elected as superintendent. We have to, if we really want to reform schooling so that it is not a social reproduction model, but it actually is an equitable place for student learning, then we need all hands on deck. So,
I love it.
mhm,
And that's
yeah,
a motivating way to go out for this episode too.
yeah.
Awesome. Well, next week we are reading. Actually, next week we're going to be taking a week off, but then the following week we're going to read You're Not the Boss of Me about resistance theory. So, in the meantime, feel free to join us on Instagram, message, comment, interact with each other. We love seeing
Mm.
you and your little faces on Instagram pop up with comments. And in the meantime, we hope that you feel remoralized.
And re-energized.
All right. We'll see you next one.
Yeah. I'm gonna do a PSA real quick.
Oh,
So sorry. Earlier in the episode, I told Ash that I had a brain freeze, and that is something that happens with ADHD and autistic individuals because when we get hyperfixated on something, our higher order thinking can shut down and our linguistic processing slows down to the point where we can no longer access words. This is totally normal. And if it happens to you, please, please, please don't feel ashamed or high anxiety or anything like that. Allow yourself to calm down, use those coping skills, use a fidget. And please understand that it is not a reflection on your IQ or how smart you are. It is a processing disorder of the brain. Yeah. Okay.
yeah. Love it.